The execution was broadcast across every human settlement, from the towering skyscrapers of Earth to the mining colonies on Titan. The Galactic Empire had made their intentions clear. Humanity was not their equal. On the screen, 6 women stood on a raised platform, their hands bound, their faces bruised but defiant. They were doctors, diplomats, scientists, non-combatants. The Empire called them spies, but the truth was simpler. They had dared to speak for Earth. They had dared to negotiate. And for that, they would die. The alien overseer, a towering figure clad in ceremonial armor, read their sentence in a guttural, synthetic tone. The execution was not swift. The Empire wanted Earth to witness every second, to feel powerless. The women gasped, struggled, and then fell still. Their bodies swayed in the sterile gravity of the execution chamber. Their deaths meant to be a warning. The warning was received, but not in the way the Empire intended. In Washington, D.C., inside a secure war room beneath the White House, the most powerful men in America sat in silence. A single pause, the breath before the storm. Then the screen went dark, and President General David Kessler turned to his assembled men. "They think we'll cower," Kessler said. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of calm that came before a kill shot. "They think we'll beg." Across the table, Admiral Ethan Walker, commander of Earth space fleets, exhaled sharply. "They just declared war. They'll regret it," Colonel Jack Reynolds said, his knuckles white against the polished surface of the table. Every last one of them. No one disagreed. Michael Briggs, director of the CIA, leaned forward. "We need a response. Fast. A declaration isn't enough. We hit them now hard, before they even consider gloating." "We don't have the tech for direct war," Walker reminded him. "Their fleet is decades ahead of us in energy weaponry, shields, even basic logistics." "That's never stopped us before," Reynolds said. "We've fought with less. We'll fight with nothing if we have to." Kessler's gaze shifted to the digital map of the Sol system hovering over the war table. The Empire had stationed fleets on the outer edges, a quiet reminder that Earth was under watch. The closest target was a supply depot orbiting Europa, a seemingly insignificant station, but a crucial node in the Empire's logistical chain. "Europa," Kessler said. "We start there. No grand speeches. No waiting. We get their supply lines, and we don't stop." Walker nodded. "I'll mobilize the fleet. Covert strike first. Keep them guessing." Kessler's expression darkened. "No covert. No deniability. We're past that." He turned to Reynolds. "Deploy the 22nd Rangers. No prisoners." Reynolds' lips curled in something close to satisfaction. "I know just the men." The drop pods burned through Europa's thin atmosphere, streaks of fire against the frozen surface. Inside, Captain Ryan Mercer checked his rifle one last time, the steel grip familiar against his fingers. Across from him, his squad of Rangers sat in silence, waiting for the signal. The mission was clear. Hit the supply depot, leave no survivors. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. 30 seconds. The pilot's voice crackled through the comms. Mercer's second-in-command, Sergeant James Holt, adjusted his visor. "Can't believe they thought this was a good idea," he muttered. "Hanging civilians? What the hell did they think would happen?" "They thought we'd roll over," Mercer said. He flexed his fingers, settling into the familiar calm before the fight. "Big mistake." The drop pod slammed into the surface, the impact shuddering through their bones. The doors blew open, and the Rangers moved as one, rifles raised, boots crunching against the ice. The supply depot was a fortified structure, half buried in Europa's crust, glowing with artificial heat. Alien sentries patrolled the perimeter, oblivious to what was coming. Mercer raised his rifle. The first shot split the silence, a sharp crack, followed by the muffled thud of a body hitting the ground. Then the storm broke. The Rangers surged forward, their movements precise, practiced. Suppressed gunfire cut through the alien guards before they could react. The alarm never had a chance to sound. Mercer's boots pounded against the metal flooring as he breached the entrance. The inside of the depot was a maze of corridors, the air thick with the acrid scent of alien fuels. Enemy combatants scrambled for weapons, but the Rangers were faster. Muzzle flashes lit the dark, and bodies crumpled in their wake. A high-pitched screech echoed through the hall. One of the aliens, trying to surrender. Mercer shot him anyway. Holt reloaded beside him. No prisoners. None, Mercer confirmed. They didn't give those women a choice. The control center was ahead. Mercer kicked down the door, his rifle already raised. The officers inside barely had time to react before the room was painted in blood and smoke. Holt moved to the main console, inserting a data spike. Uploading everything we can use. Mercer scanned the bodies on the floor, then glanced at the overhead security feeds. The entire outpost was cleared. It had taken them less than 5 minutes. Holt looked up. Orders. Mercer exhaled, steady and cold. Burn it down. They left nothing behind. The Rangers planted explosives along every structural support, rigging the depot to collapse in on itself. As they exited, fire bloomed in the night, an artificial sun against Europa's ice. In orbit, Admiral Walker watched the detonation from the bridge of the USS Washington. The alien fleet station near Europa was already scrambling, but they were too slow. The Rangers were back on their dropships before the enemy even knew what had happened. Walker turned to his communications officer. Broadcast a message to every Empire channel. The officer nodded, awaiting orders. Walker's voice was smooth, unwavering. Humanity does not forgive. Humanity does not forget. The message was sent. The war had begun. The icy ruins of the Europa depot were still smoldering when the Empire struck back. Their response came swift and brutal. An armada of warships descending upon human-controlled space with surgical precision. Within hours, listening posts along the asteroid belt were reduced to silent debris. Convoys bound for Mars vanished without a trace. The attack on Europa had been a spark, but now the fire was spreading. In the war room beneath the White House, the tension was thick enough to strangle. Screens flashed with casualty reports, red blips marking the Empire's incursions deeper into Seoul. President Kessler stood with his arms crossed, his jaw set like granite. Across from him, Admiral Walker and Colonel Reynolds studied a live feed from the front lines, analyzing the enemy strategy. "They're not just retaliating," Walker muttered. "They're tightening the noose." "They're cutting off our outer defenses," Reynolds said, "testing how fast we can react." Kessler's eyes remained on the map. The Empire had the advantage in nearly every category: firepower, technology, resources. If this became a conventional war, humanity wouldn't last a year. Michael Briggs leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "We have to stop thinking conventionally." Reynolds arched a brow. "What are you suggesting?" Briggs's voice was measured. "They're expecting us to meet them head-on, to fight the way they fight. But we're not the Empire. We're better." Kessler finally looked at him. "Go on." "We stopped trying to hold ground," Briggs said. "We stopped waiting for them to come to us. We make them bleed from the shadows. Sabotage, cyber warfare, ambushes. They're an empire, built on order. We turned their order into chaos." Walker exhaled sharply. "We'd be abandoning conventional defense." "We don't have a choice," Briggs countered. "You've seen the projections. If we keep fighting their war, we lose." Silence settled over the room. Then Kessler nodded. "Do it." The Empire's supply lines stretched across dozens of systems, a web of logistical arteries, feeding their war machine. But no empire, no matter how vast, could function without order. And order could be broken. Captain Ryan Mercer knelt in the shadows of a cargo bay on Titan's largest orbital station, his rifle pressed against his shoulder. The spaceport was swarming with alien personnel, dock workers, officers, a handful of armed patrols. Not enough to stop an invasion, but enough to notice if something went wrong. Beside him, Sergeant Holt tapped his wrist display, overlaying a real-time schematic of the station. "Supply freighters inbound," Holt murmured. 10 minutes. Mercer's earpiece crackled as Lieutenant Samuel Hayes, their embedded engineer, checked in from the control deck. "All set on my end. Their security protocols are laughable. I could have hacked this place with a calculator." "Good," Mercer said. "Keep it that way." The plan was simple. Make it look like an accident. Hayes had rigged the station's fuel processing center to overload, a slow burn that would detonate half the facility once the freighters docked. No alarms, no warnings, just a catastrophic malfunction that would cripple the Empire's logistics in this sector. 5 minutes, Holt said. The team shifted into position. Rangers moved like ghosts between crates and machinery, staying in the blind spots of the alien patrols. Mercer exhaled slowly, steadying his heartbeat. There was something primal about this kind of warfare, striking from the dark, vanishing before the enemy even knew they were bleeding. Then the freighters arrived. Massive haulers, their hulls gleaming under the station's artificial lights, docked with precision. Automated arms extended, locking them into place. A dozen alien crew members moved to oversee the cargo transfer. They had no idea they were standing over a bomb. Hayes' voice came through the comms. "And ignition." The station trembled. A low hum reverberated through the floor as fuel lines ruptured deep within the processing core. The aliens froze, confused, until the first explosion ripped through the main conduit. Fire and shrapnel tore through the docking bay, ripping freighters from their moorings. The station groaned, metal twisting under the sudden pressure loss. The screams started a second later. "Go," Mercer ordered. The Rangers moved with ruthless efficiency, gunning down anyone who tried to restore order. The alien security team barely had time to react before they were cut down, their bodies left among the wreckage. Holt tapped his wrist display. "Detonators armed. We need to clear out before this thing blows." "Extraction point?" Mercer asked. "South wing. 10 floors down." They moved fast, dodging collapsing beams and fire-spewing vents. The station's artificial gravity flickered as the damage spread. Behind them, warning klaxons blared in a panicked alien tongue. Too late to stop the inevitable. By the time they reached the extraction point, the entire station was in its death throes. The Rangers slipped into an unmarked cargo ship, just as the final detonation sequence triggered. From orbit, it looked like a star igniting. The Empire's supply hub, wiped from existence in a matter of minutes. Across human space, the pattern repeated. On the desert moon of Karsus 9, a convoy of Empire fuel carriers vanished, their last transmission garbled with static before an EMP bomb rendered them adrift. On the jungle world of Visara Prime, a military outpost lost control of its drone network, only for the machines to turn on their masters, their programming rewritten by human hackers. On the asteroid colonies of Ithos, an Empire dreadnought docked for resupply suffered a catastrophic reactor failure, detonating in a blast that shattered half the station. The Empire had never fought an enemy like this. Their war doctrines relied on overwhelming force, on direct engagements where their superior firepower crushed resistance. But now, their supply lines were disintegrating. Their commanders were left scrambling, unable to predict where the next attack would come. And the best part, the humans weren't leaving a trace. The Empire's officers, arrogant and overconfident, assumed these failures were sabotage from within, acts of defiance by their own subjugated worlds. Rebellions flared across their outer territories as their grip weakened. Their fleets, once a symbol of dominance, were now running low on fuel, on food, on reinforcements. In the White House war room, the latest reports came in. Walker smirked. "They have no idea it's us." Briggs chuckled. "They will." Kessler nodded. Then we hit them harder. The Empire was bleeding. Supply lines lay in ruins, warships drifted without fuel, and entire sectors plunged into chaos as humanity's campaign of sabotage and subterfuge spread like wildfire. The once invincible armada now reeled, unable to counter an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't stop. And yet, despite the mounting destruction, Earth's leaders knew this war was far from won. The Empire would adapt. They always did. President Kessler stood at the head of the war table, surrounded by the men shaping humanity's fate. Admiral Walker's expression was unreadable as he studied the holographic battlefield, his fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm against his folded arms. Colonel Reynolds stood beside him, ever the soldier, his posture rigid, his jaw tight, with unspoken anticipation. Across from them, CIA Director Briggs leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, his mind already working several moves ahead. "They've changed tactics," Walker said finally. "They're not spreading their forces thin anymore. They're consolidating, heavily fortifying critical supply hubs, doubling down on security. We won't be able to hit them the same way again." "They're learning," Reynolds muttered. "Took them long enough." Briggs exhaled. "That means we have a limited window before they stabilize. We need something bigger." Kessler nodded. "Something decisive." His eyes flickered toward the far side of the room, where Dr. Benjamin Carter stood, arms crossed, watching the discussion unfold. "I assume you have an answer for us." Carter smiled, the kind of smile that sent a chill down the spine. "Gentlemen," he said, stepping forward, "I believe it's time we introduce the enemy to a little thing called hell." The lights dimmed, and a projection flickered to life above the table. A rotating schematic of what looked, at first glance, like an orbital satellite, until the details became clear. A massive tungsten projectile, housed within a reinforced launch bay, built to withstand the pressures of deep space acceleration. "The Godhammer Kinetic Bombardment System," Carter explained. "Simple physics. No explosives, no warheads, no messy energy signatures for them to track. Just a dense, hyper-accelerated tungsten rod dropping from high orbit. Terminal velocity turns it into a meteor strike with the force of a nuclear detonation, minus the radiation." Walker let out a slow breath. "Rods from God." "Precisely," Carter said, smiling. "An ancient concept now refined. We've already deployed several platforms in deep space. Untraceable, undetectable, and ready to fire." Kessler didn't hesitate. "Targets." Briggs leaned forward. "There's a military staging ground on Zevros 4, one of the last major refueling stations they have left in this sector. They've fortified it beyond anything we can crack conventionally. Layers of orbital defenses, planetary shields, entire battalions entrenched on the surface. We can't take it with a direct assault." Carter's smile widened. "We won't need one." High above Zevros 4, a lone satellite adjusted its trajectory. Deep within its reinforced casing, targeting algorithms calculated wind resistance, gravitational pull, atmospheric drag. The numbers aligned. A final confirmation pinged back to Earth. Fire. The satellite's launch bay opened. A single tungsten rod, 30 feet long and impossibly dense, detached from its cradle and began its descent. There was no flash, no explosion, no telltale energy signature to warn the Empire's sensors. Just an object, falling faster than the human eye could register. The first impact came in silence. Then the world shattered. The kinetic strike obliterated the Empire's base in an instant, compressing the Earth beneath it into molten slag. A shock wave rippled outward, flattening structures, appending armored vehicles like leaves in a storm. The planetary shield, designed to repel energy-based attacks, failed to recognize the sheer brute force of the impact. Within seconds, what had been an impenetrable fortress was nothing but a smoldering crater. A second rod fell. Then a third. From orbit, the attack looked like a meteor shower. On the ground, it was the apocalypse. The Empire's command center, positioned miles from the initial impact site, scrambled for answers. The alien officers barked orders, but there was nothing to stop. No enemy ships. No incoming missiles. No sign of human forces. Just devastation, raining from the heavens. By the time the fourth strike landed, there was nothing left to defend. Mercer watched the destruction unfold from the cockpit of a stealth corvette, hovering just outside the planet's atmosphere. The aftershocks of the strikes were still registering on his sensors, entire tectonic plates shifting from the sheer force of impact. Jesus, Holt muttered, shaking his head. We just leveled a damn planet. Not quite, Mercer said, though even he felt the weight of what they had done. But close enough. Their comms flared to life. Asterisk Godhammer asterisk strike confirmed. Came the voice of a fleet commander. The enemy is in full retreat. Mercer exhaled. They had done it. A major stronghold erased, without a single American boot touching the ground. And yet, as he looked down at the burning world below, he knew this war wasn't over. The Empire would retaliate. Harder. Deadlier. They had been humiliated, their forces shattered in ways they had never imagined possible. Now, they would stop underestimating humanity. And that was exactly what Mercer wanted. He turned to Holt. Get us back to the fleet. We need to prepare for the next phase. Holt arched a brow. Which is? Mercer's gaze was cold, unwavering. Ending this war. For good. The Empire reeled, humiliated, and enraged. The destruction of Zevros 4 had not just crippled their military logistics. It had shattered their illusion of invulnerability. The humans had struck from the heavens, with a weapon so devastating, so precise, that the Emperor's War Council had fallen into chaos. Generals argued, admirals postured, but no one had answers. How could a primitive race, a species that had been dismissed as insignificant, wipe out an entire stronghold without firing a single shot in battle? There was only one path left to them. Retaliation. The Empire's fleets converged, abandoning lesser campaigns, focusing all their might on one singular objective, Earth. The final assault came without warning. Dozens of capital ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, an armada unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, planetary siege platforms, enough firepower to reduce Earth to cinders. Their strategy was clear. Overwhelm with brute force, crush resistance in one decisive strike, and erase humanity before another Godhammer strike could be unleashed. But humanity had been waiting. In the White House War Room, President Kessler stood before the largest tactical display ever assembled. The live feed showed the alien fleet advancing past Neptune's orbit, blotting out the stars with their sheer numbers. Around him, his war council stood ready. Admiral Walker, Colonel Reynolds, CIA Director Briggs, and Dr. Carter. Their final gambit was about to begin. Walker's voice was steel. The bait is set. They've taken it. On the far side of the system, a lone human battleship, USS Washington, powered up its engines. It was a relic compared to the Empire's armada, dwarfed by even their smaller cruisers. And yet, it charged forward alone, broadcasting a single defiant message. Come and get US. The aliens, still reeling from their previous humiliations, took the bait. The enemy fleet adjusted course, their formation shifting as they locked onto the lone ship. They would annihilate this last symbol of resistance before proceeding to Earth. And that was their mistake. Phase 1, Kessler ordered. In the darkness beyond Pluto, hundreds of dormant satellites flickered to life. These were no ordinary satellites. They were camouflaged war machines, the culmination of humanity's most ruthless ingenuity. Stealth missile platforms, EMP drones, AI-driven railgun turrets, all hidden in the deep reaches of space, waiting for this moment. The Washington performed a sharp turn, igniting its afterburners in retreat. The Empire's fleet pursued, unaware that they had just flown into a kill zone. Phase 2, Kessler commanded. The void erupted in light. Hundreds of warheads streaked forward, their targeting locked onto the heart of the Empire's armada. The first impacts shattered their shields, overloading defensive systems not designed for this level of precision warfare. Kinetic slugs ripped through the hulls of their warships, each strike a calculated execution. EMP drones detonated, frying their command networks, turning their coordinated formation into chaotic clusters of confusion. And then humanity's fleets arrived. From behind the gas giant Saturn, hidden among its rings, the bulk of Earth's navy surged forward. USS Liberty, USS Eisenhower, USS Reaper, each ship bearing the names of warriors past, each crew prepared to fight to the last. The Empire, now caught between a relentless bombardment and a charging human fleet, struggled to reorganize. Their massive capital ships, designed for planetary sieges and direct engagements, found themselves outmaneuvered by Earth's smaller, faster warships. For every human ship lost, 5 enemy vessels burned. Mercer Squad had a different mission. While the main battle raged, a Black Ops team deployed aboard the Empire's command vessel. Their objective: take out the Emperor's War Council in one swift strike. The interior of the alien dreadnought was a labyrinth of polished steel and pulsing energy conduits. Mercer moved like a shadow, his rifle up, his men at his back. Their insertion had been a miracle of precision, an experimental cloaked drop pod that had latched onto the ship's hull, allowing them to cut their way inside undetected. They navigated the corridors swiftly, taking out guards in silence. Reaching the war room, Mercer held up a fist. His team took position. Through the reinforced doorway, they could hear the Emperor's officers arguing, their voices tinged with desperation. The battle outside was not going as planned. Mercer planted a charge on the door. A second later, it exploded inward. The first shots were silent, suppressed rifles tearing through alien flesh before the enemy could react. The council members fell, one after another, their bodies collapsing onto the holographic display of their burning fleet. The Emperor himself stood at the center, eyes wide in disbelief. "You," he hissed. Mercer leveled his rifle. "Us." He pulled the trigger. As the Emperor fell, the entire enemy fleet faltered. Command structure collapsed. Their cohesion disintegrated. And in the depths of the void, humanity's forces seized the advantage, pressing the attack with ruthless precision. Within the hour, it was over. The surviving enemy vessels, leaderless and broken, fled the system. Earth had stood against the full might of an empire and won. Back in the war room, Kessler exhaled. Walker turned to him. "Orders, sir." Kessler's gaze was cold. "No surrender. No negotiations. We take the fight to them." A hush fell over the room. Then Briggs grinned. "Time to show the galaxy what happens when you make war with Earth."